In this demonstration, we'll take a look at the initial configuration of a Junos rotor. So I'm connected to the console port on my Junos device. When I hit enter through that console port, it asks me to log in with my root account and my password. Now, once you're logged in, you'll notice that the Junos operating system is based off Linux. So I'm sitting at a Linux prompt right now. The first thing you want to do is you want to type in the CLI command to go into the command line interface for the Junos operating system. Now, once you type in CLI, you'll be at the operation mode for the rotor itself, which is where we can go to monitor the device and the activity on the device itself. Now, if we want to be able to make changes to the device, we have to go into configuration mode. So I type in configure as a command. Now, once I type configure, you'll notice that the prompt has changed. Before configuration mode, when I was in operational mode, we had a greater than sign as part of our prompt. You'll notice that once in configuration mode, we do have a pound symbol there. So to configure the device or apply an initial configuration to the device, there's a number of settings that you may want to apply. And in this example, I'm just going to pick a few common settings that we typically would apply to a device itself. Things like a lot of times we'll give a name to the rotor. You can see here the name is currently J2300. You can see that in the prompt. So I'm logged in as root at the J2300 device. So I want to change that name of the rotor so that it has a meaningful name. The other thing you may want to do is create an initial user account. So we do have a root account, but a lot of times you may want to create an additional account that you can use for administration. So that's another setting that I want to apply. I want to create an account and also make it an administrative account. So I'm going to place that account or configure it as what we call a super user account. You may also want to do things like apply a domain name to the device. So I'm going to place this device in the domain of glennyclark.com. You can apply an IP address to the interface on the device and also do things like configure a DNS server for the device. Also, I want to show you how you can configure a password on that root account as well. So a number of different settings that we typically may look to applying on the device itself. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is, now that I'm in configuration mode, is I want to alter the name of the device. So I can use my set command. So I want to use set system, and the actual setting that I'm trying to modify within the system settings is host name. And then in quotes, you can specify the name of the device. So in this case, this is my New York R1 rotor. So I'll hit enter. I have no error messages, so it has taken that command, but notice that it hasn't applied the setting yet. The name of the device hasn't changed. Until I commit these changes, the changes are kind of like a temporary change that's been typed in. Next thing I want to do is create a login account for myself. So I'm going to do set system login. So I want to change the system settings, and specifically in this case, it is a login setting. And I'm going to create a user called Glenn. Now, when I configure this user account, I want to specify the authentication setting for this account. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start typing authentication. And one of the great things about the Junos operating system is that it does have an autocomplete feature. So I can hit tab here to cut down on how much I have to type. But also you can use this as a way to reduce typos as well, right? So notice when I hit tab, it filled out authentication. And then also I'm going to do the same thing with my next setting. I'm going to type in the letter P and then hit tab. And notice that it filled out plain text password. So what this means is I'm going to create a user account and I want to configure the authentication setting as a plain text password. So that means when I hit enter, it's going to create the account, but it's going to prompt me for the password. And I'm going to type it in plain text, meaning readable information. Now, keep in mind the actual password will get stored in an encrypted format within the configuration file, but plain text password just means that I, as the administrator, will supply a plain text password. So I'm going to type in password 1 as my password and confirm that password. So I've created a user account. Now the next thing I want to do is make that user account an administrator of the device. So I need to assign it to the class of super user. So I do a set system login user, and Glenn is the user account that I'd like to modify. And then the class is super, and I'm going to start typing but hit tab. And I could be doing that all the way through. I just keep forgetting to. So it definitely is very useful to be able to use that autocomplete feature and cut down on your typing, right? So I hit enter, and so now the Glenn account is a super user. If I log in as Glenn, I can administer the device. Now I also want to apply a domain name to this device. So I do set system, I'm modifying a system setting, and it's domain name, and the domain name is going to be glennclark.com. So the device is going to sit in that DNS domain name. Now the other thing that I may want to do is I may want to assign an IP address to the interface on the device. So I use the set interfaces command, and then I specify the identifying information on the interface. So I've got two fast Ethernet ports on this device. So I'm going to use FE for fast Ethernet, dash, and then 0/0/0. So it's the first Ethernet port on this device versus my other one is 0/0/1. And then I'm going to specify unit 0 family. Oops. And again, I should be using my autocomplete there so I don't have typos. I'm going to assign an IP address. It's going to be an IP version 4 address, so it's family INET address of 11.0.0.1/24. So I apply the IP address. The next thing I want to do is configure this device for a DNS server setting. So set system name server, and we'll say my DNS server is 192.168.1.1. And then finally, I want to configure the password for the administrator. So this is an example of definitely something that you would perform with the initial configuration of the device. So we do a set system root authentication is how I configure the password for the root account, and I am going to supply a plain text password. So I hit enter, and then I'll use my password of password 1. Now password 1 is not a good password to use. It's not a strong password, but I am going to just use that for now. Now, once I've gone and configured the device, I can use my show command to display the settings. So when I type in show, you can see at the top here, I can see that in the system configuration section, there is a host name that's been set. There's a domain name that's been set. There's a root authentication. Notice the root authentication. It is an encrypted password. So I, as the administrator, have supplied the password in plain text, but it is encrypted with inside the configuration file, and that's very important to see there. The name server setting is there. The login is there. It's created a user called Glenn and placed Glenn in the super user group or class. Again, the password's encrypted for that user. So you can see all my configuration is there. Now, you can see that it hasn't actually taken the config, so it hasn't taken my host name there, because after you configure the device, you got to commit those changes. So I'm going to type in commit and then hit enter. And you can see here now the prompt has changed. I'm root at New York-R1. So in this demonstration, we saw how to apply an initial configuration to a Junos device.